Hi everyone, what I'd like to do now is go over some things we've been talking about and consider where we might be going in the next week or so. What you see in front of you is a Wordle that I created using the responses to your questions that you did for class last week. The first question was, what is curriculum? What I did was I pasted all the text from everyone's responses and placed it in a Wordle. What the Wordle does is it looks for the words that repeat the most frequently, and then depending on how often they're written in the text, it makes them different sizes. So it's kind of a really good representation of the information that was provided in what you guys wrote. So as you can see, curriculum is the largest word. But what I really want to start thinking about is what other words came out so frequently. Next, you see children, activities, environment, teach. What's exciting about these words to me is that I really think you are all really embracing what it means to be an early childhood teacher. Children are central to curriculum, as well as the activities and environment that teachers create. Teaching isn't just something that teachers do to children or prepare for children. It's something they do in collaboration with children. The content that's taught, as you can see the word framework, is important to consider. Framework provides a structure for teachers, but it isn't exactly what's taught. While the standards might impact what teachers teach, they are not the curriculum themselves. The curriculum is something that teachers decide based on what children are interested in, and the goals that they have for children, and then from that we try to ensure that children meet the outcomes and standards that are expected of them. While there are some classrooms where the curriculum is decided for teachers, even if there's a small part of the day, it's important to realize that curriculum is something that can play a bigger part in your professional responsibilities as a teacher. If that's something that you want, you really have to embrace that and make it happen. Now let's take a look at teaching. When asked what you thought teaching was, you responded, as you can see, within the large words, teacher and students. What I really like about your responses is that it really demonstrates to me that you understand that there's a relationship between teachers and students that happens during teaching. Teaching isn't just a one-way process where teachers impart information on students and fill their heads up with great facts. It's really about the sharing of information between teacher and children, and at times teachers are learning from children and children are learning from teachers. It really is a relationship-based process. There's a lot of focus in your responses on the individual needs of children, and what's so important to consider in that is that teaching is something that occurs and should occur with the individual children in mind. Too often we think about, I teach 4-year-olds or I teach 5th grade, and there's something that we understand what that looks like. But in reality, the teaching part is really the art where you focus on determining the specific strategies that you need to use to ensure that children are learning. I want to now talk about the early childhood continuum that I like to use. What you'll notice is that on the left is sort of this laissez-faire, loosely structured classroom with a lot of time for play. What you notice in classrooms like this, and I've seen lots of them, is that teachers aren't engaged with children. What you often see is that teachers are managing behavior. Teachers are working with small groups of children in more structured activities while they play. Teachers are cleaning while children play or setting up for the next activities. If we believe that children learn through play, we have to consider what the role of the teacher is in that process. Too often these types of classrooms are what gives early childhood a bad name. Well, you just babysit, or those kids just play. Well, if we're going to advocate that play is something positive for children, we need to intellectualize that a little bit more and think about what our role is in that classroom. On the opposite end of the continuum, what you'll notice is we're focusing on didactic instruction and teacher-led activities that are even to the point now where some are scripted and teachers have no say in how they teach or what they teach. But there's very little play in that. Even in some classrooms, Teachers that are play-based, teachers use periods of time where they feel like they're actually teaching. I've heard teachers say that. Well, when I'm teaching, which is when I'm reading a book in large group or structuring a small group activity, that's when I really feel like a teacher. What I want us to start to think about is how we can feel like a teacher when we're somewhere in the center. When we're in classrooms where children lead play, what is our role in those classrooms? How do teachers facilitate learning even in child-led and child-initiated play activities? And how do we plan play activities building off of children's interests that have specific content focus that we want and hope that children will achieve certain expectations during? And this is where we're going to spend our time this semester. We're going to try to think about the spaces and places that teachers create with children where they're playing together and children are learning and teachers are engaging in this true aesthetic experience of teaching, where they really think about it as an art and something that requires incredible creativity. In any curriculum model, especially emergent curriculum, there are factors that affect early childhood teaching. And I don't think it would be fair of me to say, oh, everything's perfect in this curricular approach. Just as in any curriculum, time is something we need to think about. Time really impacts how we teach. Too often we're tied to the clock and we don't take time to slow down. What we need to do is really observe children's interests. Remember that ball metaphor where they throw it to us? And then we need to hold on and think for a second before we just jump into planning a bunch of activities for children. If our goal is really deep, meaningful learning, what we need to do is ensure that we've thought through, reflected, and planned appropriately for kids so that they can really go deep with the content we're trying to teach them. Too often we're tied to a schedule that doesn't fit our needs. We need to kind of break that down and give ourselves time to really work with kids and think about where we're going next. Next, there's that idea of structure, which so often in early childhood teachers tend to think that structure is a bad thing. Structure is never a bad thing. We all need some structure in our lives. We need structure to ensure that we're safe, that children are safe, that their well-being is being considered, and that they're learning. It's just how much structure and when we provide that structure. We all need some level of organization and some kind of structure in our lives to ensure that we meet our goals and expectations. So let's think about what that might look like in a play-based classroom. How do we provide structure with materials and the environment? How do we set that up in a way that facilitates learning? Maybe it's minimizing the number of materials we have available. If we want children to demonstrate certain skills, providing materials that allow them to use those skills or develop that content knowledge are really important. So sometimes providing less than more is one way to provide a structure for kids. It's going to ensure that they're learning and reaching the outcomes that are needed in that classroom. Another thing that provides structure is the roles that we assume as teachers. How do we use different teaching strategies? And how do children take on certain roles where they can lead, where they have time to explore, but that there's some expectation for what they're doing during certain periods of time. It doesn't mean we're controlling everything that happens, but that we can ask certain things of children at times in order to ensure that they're learning. That's one of the professional responsibilities we have as teachers. And finally, planning. There seems to be this misconception that when you're subscribed to a constructivist philosophy, that planning's contradictory to that. Well, that's really an inaccurate kind of assumption. Planning is important in any teaching situation. We're focusing more on social constructivism, where teachers and children learn together through interaction with each other. These have to be carefully planned experiences. It doesn't mean they have to be teacher-led or really didactic or direct instruction, but planning and thinking through exactly how we'd like things to go doesn't mean they will follow that path, but that we've thought through things enough that we're prepared for when children take it in a different direction, that we've thought about the different approaches we can use to ensure we're meeting the different needs of children. Instead of just saying, well, this child's not ready for something, so we're just going to let it go. Or we're just going to jump into our direct instruction mode to ensure that they do learn something. We want to believe that children can learn when provided with materials and interactions with others, but that happens in an environment that is carefully and thoughtfully planned with activities and lessons that provide some structure and utilize the time appropriately so that kids can learn. I hope this just gives you a little bit of background information on where we're going to go this semester with curriculum. So now you have a lot to read this week and think about the project approach, which is a specific strategy or a specific approach that we're going to look at just briefly to understand how these factors of time, structure, and planning can really impact kids' learning. Thanks. Have a great week.